Hello and welcome to another episode of The Wannabe Entrepreneur, the podcast about what's really like to bootstrap a company. And today we have another interview. Here with me is Hilary Black. Hey, Hilary. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's definitely my pleasure, especially because you are going to be speaking about something that I find really interesting. Hilary is an entrepreneur and she has a lot of cool projects going on, but one that really caught my eye is projects around conversational design. So chatbots, that's super cool. I find it to be a very interesting technology that for some reason, and maybe I'm completely wrong, it seemed that kind of over-promised a little bit, and I don't see that much in use. Well, we do see it sometimes in some bots, and you can order some things off Facebook or WhatsApp, but I find that there's a lot to learn, a lot to know in this area. And I'm super excited to speak with you, Hilary, about your career and also about conversational design.
Yeah, it is very interesting for you to sort of describe the opinion of chatbots because it is exactly correct that chatbots sort of came out and they flopped pretty hard. And I think the public perception was very much like, well, these are just a fad that they're going to go away. And then during COVID, they really had almost like a rebrand kind of where they started to become a lot more helpful to people, and a lot of businesses needed to utilize automation and needed to utilize chatbots in order to make their business more available to more people in other channels. So that really has helped the growth a lot. So I suspect that you will start to hear more about it, in the coming years if you haven't in the past year or two, but certainly 2017 to, 2020, it was definitely a dark age of chatbots.
Interesting. So, I found that there's a lot of interesting businesses that kind of revamped after COVID, which is always interesting, right? In every crisis, you have a lot of things going wrong and a lot of people going out of business, but then you also have a lot of business kind of booming. And it's good to know that chatbots business was one of them.
Yeah, it definitely was something, and all across, chatbots, SMS, voice, all things sort of in that automation, conversational AI space. I think we saw a lot of businesses recognizing the efficiency that it could bring to them. And so because of that, they definitely wanted to jump on board and invest in this technology.
Okay, really interesting. So I guess to kick things off and for our conversation, I would love also to hear a little bit from you, from your background. So would you mind introducing yourself to our listeners?
Sure. My name is Hilary Black, and as you said, I am a conversation designer, entrepreneur, content creator, et cetera, et cetera. But my background is actually in social media. And so I started working in social media as a community manager, strategist in about like 2010. So at the very beginnings of sort of brands getting onto social media and wanting to use it for business. So I worked in that industry for a bunch of different brands like Beats by Dre, University of Michigan. And then up until 2016, my last role was at Vine, the app. And I was the social media manager there. Cool. So through all of this, I sort of learned a lot about, content creation, a lot about writing for social media, and a lot about brand building. And then, as I said, my last job was at Vine, which, as people might know, shut down at the end of 2016.
So Vine was like the YouTube, kind of similar to YouTube, right?
It was like TikTok. It basically is TikTok, except for a different app and it was owned by Twitter. So it was, the 6-second videos, short form looping videos owned by Twitter. And I had worked there for about a year, so 2015 to 2016.
Right. Yeah, it was a huge company. I remember watching a lot of videos there.
Yeah, especially because of the connection to Twitter, people would share the videos there. And so a lot of sports and a lot of comedy videos and a lot of YouTube and TikTok creators, I think, kind of originated there.
Okay. So you worked there as a social media manager?
Yes, I did. And so when the app shut down, I lost my job and I
Oh,
had no job. And I sort of was always curious about having my own business. And I was always, afraid to sort of go out there. It is very scary to put yourself out there. But I was like, I am kind of just sick of jumping from job to job, doing the same things all the time. I want to have more freedom and more flexibility to have more say in the projects that I'm working on. So I decided to go full time freelance as a social media manager, social media consultant. And I started doing that. And through that, I started working with a company who was building mobile apps and websites for just clients kind of all over the world. And around 2017, Facebook Messenger announced that they were bringing chatbots to Facebook.
hmm.
And because I was working with this company and I was managing their social media, they were sort of like, hey, this is on Facebook Messenger. We want to have this chatbot. Can you help us with that? And I was like, sure, I know how to write a Facebook post, a Facebook message, so I can learn how to write a conversation and have like an engaging conversation with a customer. And so that was my first experience in conversation design and my first experience creating a chatbot. And I, like you, I never had heard of this before. I didn't know what it was. And at that time, it's the brand new feature on Facebook. So everyone is trying to get on this. We had a lot of customers coming to us, like big enterprise brands wanting us to build these chatbots. And so I sort of just fell into conversation design and learned that it was called conversation design. And from there, I started just like fully investing in it, sort of getting away from doing social media, moving more towards that. Started my community, and a year late, 2 years later, I created an online course. Still growing my community. A few years after that, I started a job board specifically for conversation designers. So it really has just grown over the
Hmm.
last, I believe, 6 years. And yeah, the rest is sort of history, I guess.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting. And at the moment, you live fully from your projects, from your business.
Yes. So I have, several different businesses. So I split kind of between entrepreneurship of these companies that I have like a product company. And then I also have I guess a few product companies.
Hmm.
And then I still do some freelance on the side from anything from social media consulting still to
Right.
content creation for brands, like as sort of like an influencer within conversation design, a
Hmm.
very niche sub community, and then some consulting for other outside companies outside of my own that just want general advice about conversational AI. So I'm like sort of full time entrepreneur, sort of full time freelancer.
That's a lot of different projects going on. How do you manage your time? Like, do you say, okay, Mondays is for this and Tuesdays for that, or how do you manage it?
It is a lot of projects, and I think that's what I sort of love about working for myself is getting to do that. I do try to balance it of say, Monday is my day where I have all of my meetings, or Monday and Friday is my day that I work on my social media client, and then this other day is that. But as you know, things
Hmm.
move around a lot, and it's very difficult to sort of have such a strict schedule.
Right.
So I think I tend to more just work on things as I feel like it, which isn't really the best strategy. But creating deadlines and having things be, doing the most important work first, I think it's kind of more figuring out your work style and
Right.
then also
Right.
realizing that this is kind of like the struggle of entrepreneurship. There's always work that still needs to be done. And every
Yeah.
single
Hmm.
day, you'll end the day, no matter if you end at 3, at 5, at midnight, there always is going to be more work that needs to be done. So,
Yeah.
kind of accepting that and saying, I can wait until tomorrow to do this is something that I have just had to learn over the years.
Yeah. Was it hard to get a lesson? Because I'm in the same situation. I'm also bootstrapping my projects. I have the podcast, I have the community, I have so many things going on, and I always feel that I could have done more. Right? Exactly what you say. There's always work to be done, and no boss telling you, okay, you can stop now, or there's no planning. You have to do everything. Was it hard to reach that point to say, okay, now it's time to sleep and rest and be with friends?
Yes, it is hard. And I don't want to say that I fully have reached the point because it
Hmm.
is, especially when you go on places like Twitter and you see everyone's doing all these things and it sort of seems like everyone is doing more work than you all the time. So it's sort of just being okay with not fully, I guess, accepting yourself of saying, I might not feel like I have done all of the work, but I've done as much as I can to the best of my abilities. And that's really all that I can ask for.
Hmm.
So, certainly kind of repeating those things to yourself and realizing that you need to be at your best in order to actually do the work.
Right.
So, in order to have the right energy to work on these really big things, I definitely know how important that is, especially running so many different types of companies and so many different types of
Hmm.
areas. But when I'm feeling more low energy, I can work on, the smaller tasks and things like that. So it's really like finding the balance for you, but also just accepting yourself almost with blinders on of not looking at what everyone else is doing because you
Yeah,
also don't know how burnt out other people feel, right?
exactly. Did you ever had a problem like that, like burnout or feeling really low?
Oh, yeah. I feel like
Mhm.
my life is constantly sort of the cycle of having to do a really big project, needing to get that done, feeling like you're at your end and you still have to get there. But it's really important to sort of prevent that because it's a bigger problem to be burnt out than it is to sort of take
Yeah,
a small break or, end early one day. Like it definitely is a bigger problem to not be able to work for weeks or just
yeah.
not feel inspired to work on your projects. Like that is a huge problem.
You are your biggest asset in the end, right? So if you are not okay, then it doesn't matter any other KPI or your business or your clients because you won't be able to do anything.
Exactly. You can't make money if you are burnt out. You can't keep going, and everything suffers. Like, I just try to remind myself, the creative work suffers, the content suffers, the work suffers if
Hmm.
you are suffering. So, just sort of, I think people are becoming more accepting to needing that rest, but it's certainly a culture of certain types of entrepreneurs to not prioritize that.
Yeah, yeah. I think it also comes with experience. When you first start your entrepreneurship career, you just want to do everything and then you realize, okay, that's not possible. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I definitely used to stay up really late at night working on things and feeling like, I didn't want to stop, especially when you're passionate about it, right? You
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
keep doing it. It excites you, but you sort of have to realize, hey, I need to make sure I'm checking all these boxes of the bare minimum of sleep, eating, exercise, etc.
Hmm. Hmm. And I also, in the bootstrapping world, we have this running joke, which is that bootstrappers always forget to do marketing. Uh,
Hmm.
but it's interesting because you are an expert in social media, and I don't know. For me, at least when I first started with Twitter, I felt really addicted to it. I'm always, and sometimes I still feel like that. Always checking the notifications, waking up. That's the first thing I do. As a social media manager, like it's your job, or it was at least, or still is a little bit your job to manage many social media accounts. How do you manage not to become addicted to it?
Well, it's interesting, and I feel that a lot of social media people get this way is that I spend a lot of time doing it for others. So I spend a lot less time doing it for myself. And there are a lot of things that I want to share and do, but I don't necessarily have the prioritization to do it when it's not income generating. There's a lot of tasks that are not building towards earning income and they are sort of just passions or interests.
Right.
But so just remembering that just going on Twitter and scrolling forever, which is addicting. It's designed to be addicting. They want you
Hmm.
to spend all of your time there. Sometimes it's really not helping you. And if you can limit it, or if you can just go there when you feel that you need inspiration or you want community or you want to talk to people, but also realizing that this isn't really doing anything for you, and you have other things that you should be doing.
Right, right. So when you're working for others, you consider it more a job, and you don't get somehow addicted or always looking to see if your previous post got more than X likes or something.
It's definitely something that I need to look at, of course, to make sure that my clients' posts are performing and things like that. But it is very easy to fall into that cycle of saying, we're not getting likes, we're not doing this. But to me, it's sort of like once you push publish, you've done all that you can do. There's not really anything you can control to make that perform better. So it's almost just like you have to step away from it.
Right. Yeah. So basically focus on the things you can control, right? And what you can't, don't focus about it. Don't worry too much about it.
Yeah, and you can control making your content better. You can control engaging with your community about other things versus just, refreshing your mentions or your likes or your real plays or anything like that. That's not going to get you anywhere.
When you're working as a social media manager, which platforms were like your best platforms or the ones that you use the most?
It's interesting because most of the brands I worked for in the past, Twitter was more important to them than Instagram. But especially Vine, we didn't even have an Instagram. We mostly were just on Twitter and Tumblr. And every brand is certainly very different. I will say for, B2B businesses, which is what my products are now, or even in conversation design space, LinkedIn is way more important to me than any of the other channels.
Okay.
And I think that LinkedIn, I always will say this, which is like the most nerdy, unpopular opinion, is that LinkedIn is the best social channel. I like it the most of anything. Yes, I love LinkedIn. And even for entrepreneurs too, there's so much there and people are going there to talk about work and business versus the other channels. People are going there to be entertained or they're being there to be, educated, informed. There's just a lot on LinkedIn. And I think that it is my secret channel that I just love so much.
How do you use LinkedIn to grow your business? What are your tips?
Certainly having a presence, I think similar to even an Instagram where you might have a business profile or company page on LinkedIn, but the place that's going to get the most engagement is your personal profile. So just using all the features available to you, everything from writing articles to posting to commenting, messaging, writing these like longer form posts, doing videos, doing LinkedIn Live. There's just a lot of features there. So kind of figuring out what your audience likes. But for me personally, it's just posting and commenting and having, groups and things like that. And that's where I can discover new people in my industry. So I can discover people who are going to join my community. I can discover people who might benefit from my service. And it's just a really good way to find your target audience. And I think a lot easier and people are more familiar with connecting there for those purposes versus Twitter. It's kind of hit or miss whether or not people are open to talking about business there.
Yeah. And Twitter takes a lot of our time, I feel like. I have so much scheduled content for Twitter because I don't want to miss a day without having a tweet or 2 tweets or 3. So it really consumes a lot of my time. And it's definitely, I think for me now is my second main source of users. So Indie Hackers is the first one. And then Twitter is the second one. But those are the ones that I focus the most anyways. And LinkedIn sometimes I feel there are certain posts that I post and they have a lot of, at least they show a lot of views. But sometimes I also post and they are complete miss and I have no one liking or engaging with it.
But isn't that the same for Twitter or for Instagram or any channel? Like some are hits and some are misses. And certainly I've learned a few things, which I think people on Twitter have learned, how to get that engagement so that you can get seen by more people. But it really is just consistency.
Yeah. You also mentioned that you run a community. When I was doing a little bit of a research about you, I saw that you have actually, at least it seems, 2 communities. One on Facebook with about 2,300 members, and another one on Twitter, actually using the new Twitter feature with community. Is that only it, or do you have some other forums?
Those are my main communities that I have. I
Okay.
do have a LinkedIn group that is specific to like a piece of content. So there's like a daily challenge where people post their results in the LinkedIn group. But that's
Okay.
something that's, I guess, like more specific purpose. But my Facebook community and my new Twitter community are both just for networking.
Okay. So people that join these communities, do they pay you? Are they paid communities?
They are not. They are free communities.
Okay. Why?
I don't know. I think that I started my Facebook community back in when I first got into chatbots. So I had been maybe a conversation designer for a couple of months, and then it was sort of, are there other people out there that are like me? So
Hmm.
I just started the group not really knowing if anyone would join, and over the years a lot more people have joined, and so I always have thought of the idea of saying, like, should I make this into a membership community that's on a different platform that's not Facebook? And to me it's sort of, I don't like the idea of having people needing to pay to be there, especially
Mm-hmm.
when they didn't used to have to pay to be there.
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of it is, I want that sort of interest for people who don't know what this career is to feel comfortable joining. But then on the other hand as well, if you make something paid, there's an expectation that comes that you're going to be super active, that you're going to be providing all this value,
Yeah.
that you're going to be there all the time. And it's not a place that I can be all the time, but
Right.
it is just a place that I genuinely love to be. I love to just have communities. So I'm sure I could go that way, but I just never have felt that it was the right decision for that particular community to have
Yeah.
it be paid. And the Twitter community, I was sort of like, this is a new feature. I want to try it. And I get a lot of messages from people saying that they aren't on Facebook. So I really wanted a place where people could go that aren't on Facebook. So that one is newer and smaller, but it still is very exciting to have that new space.
Mhm. So tell me about this Twitter community. So you tried it out. You have 138 members. Is it a cool feature? Because I see Twitter now. They are launching so many features, but
Yeah, I
then I
know. I've
noticed that
noticed
they are
that.
not that good sometimes. That they could be improved. Even the spaces, for instance, I tried to do a space before, and I mean, just a lot of things just didn't work properly. So how is it with this community on Twitter?
It's very interesting, especially previously working for a social platform where sub communities were very popular. So on Vine, there were several sort of like channels that were around sub communities, from everything from K-pop to, anime to music to all different types of things. And so seeing people sort of gather there is something that I've always noticed on Twitter. And you sort of will see that there's a lot of people who are in particular, marketing communities, or they post marketing content, and then you sort of get like sandboxed, and you feel that every person following me only follows me for marketing. They only care about marketing, but I care about other stuff too.
Right.
So it becomes difficult. And for someone like me, who I have a lot of interests and I have
Mhm.
a wide variety of background and things like that, I want to use Twitter to post about whatever I want, whenever I want. So it is nice to have this entirely different timeline where it's only about that. So especially people who are in my other communities, that, they're liking that they can go on Facebook and just consume this. People who are conversation designers, but, they're working a 9 to 5 job, they only think about conversation design then, and then they go on and live their life. They can still participate. And so it's very exciting to be able to have a place where
Mhm.
that stuff is all grouped together. Certainly, it's still an early feature, and there are improvements that I would make if I was working on this product.
Okay.
But I do think that they are going in the right direction by like leaning into this sub community idea. And I hope that they keep it around, because as we've seen with, every social network, they sort of introduce things and then take them away. So I hope that this will be one that sticks around.
Yeah. So people can follow this community without following you.
Correct. So right now, the one thing I wish would change is you can only invite someone via direct message. So I have to invite them. I can send them the link, but I noticed that people join more when they are invited versus just when
Right.
they come across it. But yeah, a lot of people in there don't follow me. So it's also a good way to not have to follow a lot of people about a specific topic that you might be interested in, even that doesn't have to do with your job. If you like a certain TV show, you don't want to follow 100 accounts because that will crowd your main feed. But if you had an entire place to go that was only about that you could consume when you want, that is very interesting.
Definitely. I just joined the community, by the way. I'm curious now.
Oh, thanks.
To check it out, to check what this is. And so I guess you also use your communities. I was asking all of this because I have, my main source of income now is a paid community for bootstrappers. But in your case, being a free one, you use it mainly, I guess, as a marketing channel for the products that are actually making you money, right? So your job board, I assume, consultancy, all of that.
Yeah. So the main way that when I started my community, I just want to say first, I didn't have a plan for how am I going to make this a business. And I think that it's often something that entrepreneurs want to know how they can make everything a business. So I started it just for fun. And through that, once I had my course and I've done, a few events and workshops and things like that, I really have spent a lot of years building these trusts with these people that I'm saying, I'm giving you all this content for free. I am giving you basically unlimited access to me for free. And so I've built a lot of strong relationships on trust with these people. So now they are a lot more likely to join other communities, to, sign up for things, to recommend me. And then most importantly, my other source of income for my conversation design community is my job board. So when I launched that and I say, I need conversation designers to create candidate profiles on here, there's hundreds of people who are ready to do that. And that's something that allows me to still not have to charge them money to show up, but I can in turn charge businesses to show up, which is something that I'm a lot more interested in, of charging the companies versus charging the individuals.
The community, at least the one on Facebook, more than 2,000 members. It's probably, I don't know. Do you have any problems managing this community? Some people spamming, some haters there. Do you have anything like that?
I'm sure I have haters that have not revealed themselves to me. And I do have occasionally spam, but I do think that it might be the size of the community. It might be the specific topic, but people really are there to learn, and they also are there to ask questions. So we don't get a ton of engagement because the unfortunate thing about Facebook groups is that you still have to fight their algorithm. So I could post something and these people have all opted in to want to see it, but they're not going to see it. So I still only reach, 10% of the people, which is really unfortunate. But people go there to ask questions about their work and their job. And so it's kind of a place where people don't have anywhere else that they can go ask these questions. So that's why I think we get so many people. And then a lot of people come in because they've consumed a piece of my content somewhere else. They've gone on my YouTube and watched a webinar replay, or they have, gone to a panel that I was on, or podcast or anything like that. So that's how a lot of people get in there too.
Right. Yeah. You just spoke about something that very, very interesting for me, which is the algorithm, the social media algorithms. And especially in the beginning, I was always very against it because I didn't want to, constantly fight against algorithm and figure out. So at some point, I felt that I was not creating content for people. I was creating content for this algorithm that was, of course, created by people. But, I don't know. I felt that a lot of the content nowadays is kind of shit, on YouTube and this kind of stuff. It's like this very short, not that interesting content, but it just sells a lot. I would love to hear your take as a social media manager. Like, what do you think of the algorithms? How this is evolving? Is this beneficial or not for social media and for humans in general?
Well, it definitely has changed a lot. Like I said, I got into social media management in 2010 when there weren't even Facebook pages. It was like Facebook profiles. So there definitely has been a lot of changes, and I have seen the engagement go down and down and down over the years, which is really unfortunate. And especially when you're talking about managing client expectations, it's very difficult to say, I have no control over how this is going to be received. And we
Right.
could
Yeah.
put out something that is absolutely amazing and it couldn't go anywhere just because of the algorithm. And obviously, there are things that you can do, like you're saying, you can put out the certain type of content that the algorithm wants you to. But even if you do, sometimes that still doesn't perform
Yeah.
well. So
Yeah.
that's very difficult. And I just was reading, an article yesterday that was saying people don't want to watch reels. Like, why do they keep pushing these on people? And it's sort of like, I always just think of it as Facebook is a business, and their business is to make money, and their business is to charge businesses to, show up in front of the people they want to show up in front of.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that they're prioritizing the user experience as it relates to getting their content seen. What they're prioritizing is amount of content that there is there. So they almost want you probably to not do very well so that you publish more content. And then what is going to generate the most revenue for them as it relates to ads, as it relates to, businesses trying to target people. So the more they can get people sort of like interacting there, the more they can charge businesses to show up in front of them. And so as engagement goes down, the amount that brands are spending to get their content seen and to get their ads seen is going up, which is actually what they do want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is this fair? You think it's good?
I mean, like I said, it's a business. So
Yeah.
I don't know if fair is really what they want to be measured on.
Yeah.
Certainly, do I wish that organic engagement was better? Yes, I think that as we've seen over the years, social media has had such a negative effect on people's mental health, on development in younger people. And I think a lot of that has to do with the algorithm, and a lot of it has to do with people spending all of their time doing this or being very interested in it, publishing it, and then the platform is saying no one likes this, when in fact, just no one has seen it. It's not that no one likes it. So I don't think that it's a good thing. And I think we've seen through all of the changes that, governments are trying to make for these platforms is that they want that to change too. But it's hard for especially a young person to realize that it actually has nothing to do with them and it only has to do with this business.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what's really scary for me?
What?
Is when I've noticed this already, like YouTube, I use YouTube a lot. I really enjoy that. And they kind of, I don't know, it feels that they already have a path that will transform me into a subscriber of a certain channel. And it's interesting because there was, for instance, a musician that started popping up in my feed. And they just started with a very simple video. It was like maybe a 10 seconds or like 30 seconds video where they said, this artist, look what happens when someone or some phone rings in this artist's concert. And he kind of mimicked the sound of the tone of the phone. I was like, okay, this is really cool. And then they kept on showing me other videos, and in the end I was like super addicted to this artist. And then I was asking a friend of mine, he is also like into music and so on, and I told him about this artist. He said, yeah, I'm also actually now looking into this artist. It's like, what was your first connection with the artist? And it was the exact same video, the one with the phone. I was like, oh my god, they kind of figured out how to make you like a certain artist, what should be the path, to guide you towards become a fan. And it's absurd for me,
Yeah, but at the same point, are you glad that you know about the artist versus not know about them?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, so it does have its positives in that way that I personally love, especially having worked at a video platform. I would love the content that was suggested to me. I love trying to find content. I love just trying to, get the algorithm to be the best as possible for me. And I have tried to do that across other social channels. Is a lot of things that are getting recommended to you are because of the way that you're interacting with others. So as much as you don't want to control when you are favoriting something or not. It does in turn recommend other types of content to you because it's signifying that you like this. So I do find it very interesting if you spend time trying to curate your experience, it does work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It definitely works, but yeah, in this case, I like the artist, but what if they make me like something that I didn't like in the beginning? I don't know. It's a bit.
Yeah.
A
I
bit
mean,
weird.
certainly
What I
we
mean?
all get recommended content,
Yeah.
especially if you look at like your Instagram Explore page, you get a lot of content on there that you don't care about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, let's get into the conversational design. I think we already chatted a lot about social media, and this is somehow connected. I guess I'm also interested in knowing your opinion on that. But to start, what is a chatbot? Can you like describe for the listeners?
A chatbot is an automated virtual assistant or an intelligent virtual assistant, whatever you want to call it. It is an automated system that is interacting in a two-way experience with the user. So that's a very complicated way of saying that it's a conversation where you're having a conversation with a machine instead of with a person. And that conversation can be improved based on information that you have given in a previous conversation, on data that a company has on you, or just on general natural language. So it can be using, artificial intelligence to have a better conversation. And
Cool.
yeah, so that's sort of, I guess, the technical definition of a chatbot. And then people use that for anything from a business use case of qualifying someone for a service, of customer support, of serving up relevant content to someone based on what keywords they're putting in. There's a lot of different uses for it for businesses.
When I first started seeing chatbots, I guess if I remember correctly, everyone was speaking about the idea of creating something that you wouldn't even recognize that it's not a human. How far are we from this point?
We're so far from that being
Really?
a thing. Well, and also there's a lot, like it's a lot more complex than that too, because not only are we far away from that, it's actually not encouraged and not ethical to pretend that something is a human when it is a person. And in most of the United States, it's actually illegal to pretend that you are a person when you're an automated system. So I think that like the perception that it could be something that is like deceitful to people, that has done a lot of negative in terms of like the public opinion of trust of chatbots. But we definitely are technology wise. We have a really, really long way to go in terms of you interacting with things like out in the world and not knowing that you're actually talking to a chatbot.
Yeah. And why is that? What are the biggest challenges when coding a conversation with the bot?
So the technology is actually probably the biggest challenge, just because there is a lot that goes into, when I'm describing it, it's an automated conversation. It sounds very simple, but there's a lot that goes into it in terms of the experience behind that and the technology that is powering it. So when you're talking about, natural language processing, the way that people talk is different everywhere in the world, and the accents that people use is different everywhere in the world. And so you're expecting that an automated system is using, all this technology to understand every single instance of every single word in every single language and every single way that someone pronounces it. So that obviously is very complicated. And so when you have something that's like very narrow scoped and you're saying, this is what this experience is for, if someone stays on track with that experience, they will have a very natural, free-flowing conversation.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it doesn't go that way, and the person tries to do something else, and then it sort of throws it off of saying, we didn't predict that you would want to talk about this, so therefore there's no answer for me to give.
And is the job of a conversation designer to predict this kind of paths?
It's part of the job. So the job is really twofold. First, writing the dialogue that the chatbot is saying. So
Okay.
what it's saying without, the human trying to mess with it, so saying, hello,
Yeah.
welcome to Amazon or anything like
Yeah.
that.
Let's take a real example. So let's say, what is the most used or the best use case for a chatbot in your opinion?
I personally think the best use case for a chatbot is to qualify someone for a service.
What does that mean? Qualify someone?
So that means, say you want to buy a house and
Right.
you can interact with the chatbot and say, this is my budget. This is my, like, where I want to live. This is my credit score. This is this. And then it will say you're qualified or not qualified.
Okay, got it. So let's say you, as a conversational designer, have this gig and you want to design a bot to qualify a person to buy a house. What are, how do you do that? Like, what are your first steps?
So the first steps is to, of course, understand what are all of those qualifications necessary for a person to qualify for the service.
Right.
But essentially, what conversation designers will do is they'll look at the entire thing of saying, a person's coming in here, we want them to get to here, to the end goal. What are all the steps we need to go in between that?
Right.
And then what is the easiest way that we can have this conversation with the person? Whether that is having the questions and the experience be short, it might be having it have buttons versus just asking them open-ended questions. And then we'll sort of try to get all the information from the person through this back and forth interaction. So a lot of it is kind of simplifying the steps and simplifying the language as much as possible in order to move the person through the conversation.
So you really need to take your time to also understand the business, right?
Yes, absolutely. Especially when you're doing these sort of like sales and marketing use cases. A lot of times businesses might be using a call center or an online form in order to do this information beforehand. And now you're taking that and turning it into a partially
Right.
automated conversation.
Right.
So definitely understanding the business. And that's why it's always sort of, the first step is identifying what your goal is. So your goal is to return the answer of if a person is qualified or not qualified. And that's just it, because you also are only wanting to measure yourself on what can be completed in the chatbot, not how many people are qualified, because it's not up to you if a person is actually qualified. Them being not qualified is still completing the experience, if that makes sense.
Got it. Yeah, makes total sense. So you have your goal, you have the information that you need, and then you design the best flow. What details you need to pay attention when designing this this best flow to get to see if the user is or not qualified for buying a house?
There are several things I would say are super important, but the most important thing is that it should be easy. And so it should be easy in the way that it feels natural, but also that you aren't making any of the questions sort of ambiguous. So the way that people talk, a lot of times there'll be these sort of like casual filler words or casual language where people don't realize that they actually end the end of their sentence with a question when they're not really asking a question. It's the same as how when I was talking to you, I said, if that makes sense, or I'll say, right. And that's sort of a question, but it's not really a question.
Right. So you need to have those cases. You need to, because you're not coding, right? You're just actually, yeah, that's a great question. How do you deliver the work to your employer? Like you're not coding, right? So you just have like a flow diagram or something like that.
Yeah, so I personally am not coding. Some conversation designers will code, or there are a lot of no code tools that you can use to actually create this experience beyond just the copy. But typically, what I would do is I would hand off a flow diagram, so like a flow chart, plus all of the copy, which I actually just write in a Google spreadsheet. And I would hand that off to them because that will show them this is how this should work. And then it will also tell them this is the words that it should say. And that's sort of the first part of just the experience. And then the other part that you were sort of asking about earlier is like the intents. So these are
Right.
things that
Yeah.
are more technology related and they are more predictive versus everything I've described up until this point is just about like rules. So it's just about if a person says this, they go here. If they say this, they go here.
Hmm.
But there's all the in between. So there's all the things that they could say, or there's all the things that every single zip code is different in the entire world, and you need to validate those zip codes are a correct zip code
Yeah.
or phone number or things like that. So there's all those sort of background things that are done in other ways.
And it's part also of the job for you to put all of those exceptions in the material that you deliver.
Yeah. So in almost all cases, you would also want to create a scope for here's all the things that I want this chatbot to know. And there are some ways that you could sort of say validating a zip code is something that is more of a technical feature. So you would say we need to validate if this is a real zip code. However, if it's not a real zip code, then you need to say, what are we going to say to this person if this is not a real zip code?
Yeah. Wow, it seems very complex. How long does it take for you to design such a flow? Like, for instance, the one we just mentioned of qualifying some person.
It depends on the complexity of the experience. And also, it would depend on what I was sort of just describing of how many intents you are going to have. But I
Right.
mean, it could take, and how experienced you are too, of course. It could take anywhere from days to weeks, I'm sure, depending on a lot of it is like how much information do you have up front. So, do you have an entire sales script that you're essentially just copying over and making it more conversational? Or are you inventing everything from scratch? And that could take a lot longer.
Yeah.
Is this like an entirely new thing? And then how much like data or things are you collecting that fall in those sort of outside paths? So a lot of times if you're just chatting on a website and saying, do you want to book a demo? Yes. Like what day? A lot of those things can be kind of predetermined and you can almost borrow the like data and you can borrow the data sets from other things. But a lot of it then will need to be created by either a conversation designer or there also are kind of like AI trainers or like people that work specifically to create those intent libraries. And that could be a conversation designer or not.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said that it might take weeks, right? So how well paid is this kind of gig? When if someone asks you to do this, will it cost a lot of money, or like what is the budget that someone that wants to basically create a simple conversational design to qualify a potential client? What's the budget that one would spend?
Well, typically, if someone is wanting to have something like that, they also will be wanting it to be implemented. So a lot of the like service angle of this would be a like full project. So you would just be saying, I want a functioning qualifying chatbot on my website. And that again can really range in terms of the complexity of it, if you want it to be built on like your own platform or if you want it to be built on another tool like ManyChat or ChatFuel, those are things that are low cost or even free in order to actually deploy one of those and put it onto your website. So that can be a lot more low cost. Okay. Or if you want to have like a fully intelligent chatbot that knows that like something that's on like delta.com, you know, that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, I'm sure.
But let's take the most simple example where you're just using a no-code tool, or rather they will just they just want you to create the flow. They don't want the implementation. What's the budget for that?
Yeah. So say that, you're just hiring a freelance conversation designer to create the dialogue and then you're going to build it yourself. That could be something that people would do. So, I mean, typically, depending on the amount of experience a conversation designer has, which, you know, as we sort of have touched on, this is a very new job. So a lot of people don't have a lot of experience. It could be anywhere, I think, between probably like $45 an hour up to like $150 an hour if you're getting someone who's very experienced. But typically the range is more between, I'd say like 45 to 65 an hour. which
Okay.
can equate to like 70,000 US a year or more. Most of the roles are, I think, in between, like $55 to $65 an hour and
Mhm.
$80,000 a year.
Okay, got it. So, and this might be a little bit of a provocative question, but what is then the difference between implementing? Let's take the same use case when I'm qualifying someone, right? I could also just create a form on a website and ask them to fill in their answers and then calculate if they are qualified or not, right? What
Mm-hmm.
is the difference? Or why is a chatbot, which probably is a more costly implementation, why would it still be worth it to spend that extra money into a chatbot instead of a form?
Sure. And I do feel that the ranges that I'm giving are also could be for something that is even more complex. So a lot, like the Delta one, that's customer service. So they have a lot more content in there. They're trying to
Mhm.
support a lot more than a small business, for example.
Yeah, of course.
Um, so I do think, and I would say that there's two main benefits to using chatbots, no matter what channel you're using them on. And the number one benefit is that it saves you time. And so typically the form wouldn't necessarily be what it's replacing. And a lot of times it is. The forms are very long. The forms are a bit like archaic in how they
Yeah.
are
Hmm.
presenting the information. But a lot of times it's actually replacing a phone call instead. So that's
Ah,
actually like human time and effort. And that is or even a text message conversation, a non automated text message conversation. That is requiring a lot of time. It's taking away time from doing other things. And so that is very costly. And then it actually does factor in, if you are doing this in an automated way, you could either downsize your team could be doing other things, and you just generally are saving a lot of efficiency by
yeah,
doing
yeah.
that. And then the second thing, which is a lot more particular to WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, and SMS, is that if a person is filling out a web form and they close the tab, they are gone forever. You could send them an email, but emails, as we all know, get very low open rates.
Hmm.
And if a person is interacting with the chatbot and they close the browser, you can message them again and say, "Hey, do you want to continue?" And they
Right.
can continue the conversation right then and there.
Yeah.
And that's something that we see a lot of people do. So these sort of re-engagement follow-up messages, these channels are all the most used apps on people's phone, like
Hmm.
Messenger, the Messenger app, the iMessage app, and WhatsApp are the most used apps on any phone.
Yeah. True.
So people are going to open those. They have like a 98% open rate versus an email has like 20% open rate.
Yeah.
So
98.
you are
Wow.
able to get people through, and just the general experience. It's a lot easier for people to just have this text conversation than it is for them to sit down,
Hmm.
fill out a form that might take them 30 to 40 minutes.
I'm convinced. Makes total sense. At the and I like this also comparison. You're not comparing it with a form. You're comparing with a real conversation, either a text
Yeah,
message or
exactly. With
a
a
phone
sales
call. And
rep,
yeah,
with anything like that.
if you put it in that perspective, then it makes sense to invest. And so, okay, let's say I'm convinced, and I want to hire a conversational designer, and I can go to your website, which is another of your
Yes.
project. You have a job board, conversationdesignerjobs.com. Tell me more about this business, how it came to be, and is it profitable? Was it hard to assemble? How
Mhm.
was it?
Yeah. So the way that this business came to be is because I, as a person who has a community, who is very active in the conversation design space, I was constantly receiving messages from conversation designers asking if I knew any leads about jobs, telling me that they were looking for a job. And then I was also constantly receiving messages from companies and from recruiters saying, "Hey, do you know any conversation designers?" Because everyone knows, of course, yes, I know hundreds of them. But I am not a recruiter, and I am not trying to be a recruiter. And so I really saw this need for some place where these conversation designers could create a profile. And so we have these candidate profiles. and then something that would be very specific to this particular niche. So the skills that are required to be a conversation designer, including tools, platforms, certifications, like hard skills, soft skills, all of that, they're very different from the skills that are required to be like a UX writer or a growth marketing manager. And if you just post a job on LinkedIn, you have no way of filtering out people who don't have those skills. So I decided to create this board where these candidates could select which skills that are only specific to conversation design and these platforms. And they could say, I have all of these skills. A company could post a job and say, I'm looking for someone that has these skills and not these skills. Because a lot of times, certain companies, they work off of certain like agile, or they are trying to do a voice experience, not chat. And so there's people who are more qualified in different ways for those roles. So then the company posts a job, they get matched up instantly with these candidates, and the profiles are all like private. So you can only see them if you have been matched with a role, and then they can hire them. So yeah, so I launched it, I want to say it was January of 2021. And it was just honestly like a weekend project where I had sat down with my husband, who also works with me on all of these other ventures. And I just said, I really want this job board. Nothing out there has the features that I want. And that's sort of how like every idea for a company or a product that we have goes, where it's like, I want this thing. It doesn't exist. So let's make it. So we made that, and we just decided to, work on it over like the holiday break and then launch it and, get candidates to sign up. So I have, people from my network that have signed up, and then I have both jobs that companies have posted, or I source jobs, individually to make sure that we still have jobs on there and that it still is valuable to people, regardless of if a recruiter's posting in the job or if I'm posting it.
So before launching, because in these kind of platforms, I feel there's the chicken and the egg problem, right? So you need jobs to get people, you need people to get companies wanting to advertise their jobs. So you have the advantage that you already have a community, right? You already have an audience of people. So did you first kind of populated your database with jobs that you sourced yourself and then showed it to the community, or did you first try to get the community on board? What was the process?
So I did sort of both. When I launched it, I made sure that there were jobs that had been posted. And while it would be valuable for recruiters to post a job on a board that has a specific niche audience of viewers, it's not as valuable as it is with the candidate profiles. So I definitely went towards getting the community on board to create these profiles, getting them on board to, subscribe to job alerts. And I just made sure that I was sort of providing, all of these job listings on a regular basis, because there are a lot of them. And so I had no problem being able to populate that from other sources, whether that's Google, LinkedIn, etc. And then I also sent messages out to all of the people who had been messaging me, asking me for referrals. And so basically now if a person asks me for a referral, I instead direct them to this job board, or the other way around. I will see a job posted on LinkedIn. I will message the person who's hiring and I'll say, hey, I noticed that you're hiring for a conversation designer. I have a targeted audience of 5,000 conversation designers that I would love to get this in front of. It's sort of a no-brainer for them in that regard, right?
Yeah. And how is it going for you? Do you have a nice income stream coming from this project?
It definitely has been slower, I would say. And while I have made some income off of it, and especially for being more of a personal project, I would say that it is successful to me in that way, that it's a few $100 or $1,000 here or there. But it's definitely slower to getting people to post because it costs money. So, it costs $200 or $195. And so it is more difficult in that way. And I also would say a personal challenge of mine is I'm not really great at selling. And that's probably why I do a lot of things for free, is because, getting in front of these people on a regular basis is something that I need to make sure that I do, of constantly doing outreach to people posting jobs, but also just making people more generally aware. So that could be not through one-to-one messaging. It could be through content. It could be through podcasts. It could be through doing like webinars or doing panels. And I do a lot of other external things to make sure that people know about the board. And then the benefit of that too is the candidates who have gotten jobs from it, which several people have gotten jobs from it, they also recommend it. So they'll recommend it both to candidates and to recruiters who message them. So it definitely is picking up. And I do think that it will continue to pick up as it goes.
Yeah, definitely. Because as you said, now with COVID, everything got more digitalized. And I don't know if you know who Peter Levels is. Peter Levels is also a bootstrapper, and he has a huge job board. It's called remoteok.com. He just recently, after COVID, there was it basically only shows remote jobs there, and there's like tons and tons. Like there is a revenue like tripled or something just after COVID. So it's definitely a market that is still growing. So there's that possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely a market that I find these sort of specialty roles, especially now that people can work remotely, you can hire people outside of your city. And so there's a lot more availability and capacity to hire people in other places of the world that you wouldn't necessarily meet unless you have a specialized audience. And so the people who have posted jobs and paid, they have all been extremely happy with like the quality of the candidates, because for them, they're going on LinkedIn and messaging 1,000 people and getting maybe 1 or 2 messages back from someone who doesn't end up working out, versus knowing that you're going to put your post in front of an audience of people who this is all that they do and they have these skills and all of that.
Yeah. So at the moment, your main source of revenue is more the consultancy part?
So my main source of income, I would say, is our product company, which is in like the conversational AI space. So we have a platform that sales reps and that businesses can sign up for to get SMS chatbots for sales. So for qualifying, following up, etc. So that is sort of the main project that I work on. And that's the main like source. And that started as a consultancy and then sort of pivoted into product as we kind of just validated what we wanted to work on. And then secondly, it is consulting both social media and then in conversation design. I would say my online course is also a pretty big source. And then some like coaching and like little things in that as well.
So you have a lot of projects that actually bring you money, right? So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Of course,
yeah, it's good because, you don't have to entirely rely on one thing, but it also is a bit complicated to work on so many different things at once.
Yeah, can imagine. And I guess the advantage of the job board and the company and the course is kind of passive income, right? So, I mean, you still have to maintain it, but it's not totally connected with your hours of work, whereas maybe consultancy, I mean, if you don't work, you don't get any payment, right?
Yeah, exactly. And my course is, I created the course 2 years ago this month, and I still am making, thousands of dollars each quarter from it, from having to do it once. So that is definitely, I of course promote it every place that I go, but I'm going these other places anyways. So it works both in that way.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting that you have a lot of multiple projects, but all of them around conversational design. So they kind of all point to each other.
Yes,
so
exactly.
You have the free community, then you have the job board, then you have your course, then you have all of this connecting with each other. So yeah, it's very, very smart. What are your next steps in the 2022? What are you excited about?
So my next step is my new project, which I have, been working on all of these projects. But yeah, so that is definitely what I'm working on now, which is I started conversationdesignerjobs.com for myself. But in doing that, I realized that a lot of other people are in the exact same situation as me, where they have these communities, they have these networks, they are constantly getting messages from people. They're trying to keep their network of saying, you know, I know all of these professionals looking for roles, I know all these companies. And so giving these people a platform where they can actually create their own job board for their own niche professional, and they can have these candidates and they can, have this job board on their own. So that is what I am working on now, which is, the platform that is powering my own job board that I made for my own self now is going to be available to other people.
Cool. That's really smart. Do you have already a name for it?
Yes, the name is Career Club. We will be launching the marketing site hopefully this month, but it is careerclubhq.com, and then everywhere on social is Career Club HQ.
Really cool. And you said you work with your husband. Are you both then doing full-time entrepreneurship?
Yes, we both do full-time entrepreneurship. He works on the conversational AI product. He's the CEO of that company. And then he also has a few other smaller side projects that he does as well, in addition to Career Club.
Cool. It's really, really interesting. Yeah,
it's a busy household.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. It's really interesting to learn more about all of these topics. And as a last question for you, I would just like to know, where is like all of this energy coming for all of these projects, all of this passion? What keeps you going?
I think what keeps me going really is the freedom of it. I think that's why a lot of people get into entrepreneurship, is freedom, which could mean anything from financial freedom. It could mean free to spend your time a certain way. It can mean, free flowing creativity. These are all things that are sort of like a core pillar to my life, to my, family, that we're saying we live by this, principle of freedom. And so what we need to do that is to sort of design a life that works around that. And so being able to have our own companies and being able to have all these ventures is something that is so exciting to me, because I'm not just doing the same thing every single day. I'm not just going to a job. And I've had a lot of jobs that were fun jobs, that were impressive jobs, but they never really fulfilled me in that way, because I was always doing, what every other person wanted me to do.
Yeah. No, I totally relate to that. Hilary, it was a pleasure to speak with you. I will link your Twitter profile and your projects in the show notes of this episode, and anything you want me to link, so the listener can just go to the show notes and check it out. Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was super fun.
Yeah, same for me. And for the listener now, if you want to hear from other entrepreneurs, other bootstrappers, make sure to go to wannabe-entrepreneur.com, and I've interviewed a lot of people about their journey. And if you are a bootstrapper and you want to find a community of like-minded people, you should join us also in the WB space. We are all there working together, supporting each other in our projects, and it's really, really fun. This was another Wannabe Entrepreneur. See you next time.